Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game with me, Kevin Day, and Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire. Kieran, Happy New Year to you. Happy New Year to all our listeners as well. I don't think it's too late to say that. It's only the 3rd of January, is it today, Kieran?
It is.
Yes.
And I'm wearing Christmas socks, and I'm wondering, is there a cut-off date in respect of wearing Christmas socks? You know, how far into January can I go?
Well, no one tends to look at your socks, Kieran, so you can probably carry on. I wouldn't be wearing them on the beach in Monaco, for example. And I don't even know if there is a beach in Monaco in July. It's only the 9th day of Christmas, Kieran. Christmas is still going on. So I note with some alarm that you tweeted that you've taken your Christmas tea down already, Kieran.
Well, I do what I'm told.
Well.
And if the Baroness says, take the Christmas tree down. But I did discover 2 coins which had not been snaffled by the grandchildren or Finley. And that was a major win. It was certainly more exciting than West Ham versus Brighton on Tuesday night.
They say money goes to money, Kieran. So even chocolate money goes to chocolate money. Yeah, that was a dreadful game. Luckily, Ed and I resorted to watching Slow Horses instead, which was much better. That was an awful. It really was. It's twice over the holiday period. Ed and I said, "We'll sit down and watch a game of football." First one was Liverpool Man United. Well, that's not going to be. That's just the worst game we're going to see for months. And then West Ham Brighton last night. Yes. And talking of Christmas, Kieran, I take a couple of days off the old social media over Christmas, but I had to report to Ali because I get notifications from certain people. You've got your own ping that comes up on my phone. I keep saying, Ali, he's tweeting, Ali. He's tweeting on Christmas Day. And Ali's eyebrows were going up. So today, as I say, is the 9th day of Christmas, which I believe today is 9 accountants amortising. And if you carry on doing all the social media stuff you've been doing, tomorrow's going to be 10 baronesses grouching. But we blame Sir Jim Ratcliffe, Kieran, for your dereliction of duties at Christmas, because that was the big story over the Christmas period. The Jim Ratcliffe finally completing his purchase of 25% of Manchester United. Can we confirm what the figure was, Kieran, and do we know what happens next in terms of how the club is going to be run in future?
Yes, I mean, he has acquired 25% of the B shares, which are the shares which are owned by the Glazer family, and he's paying $33 a share for those. Now, that compares to a market price before the offer was announced of $19.84. So it's quite a significant premium. But in order to prevent lawsuits flying his way, and this was why the deal has been delayed, he's come up with some sort of fudge solution that he's going to offer to buy 25% of the other shares, the A shares, the one which only carry 1 vote each, from people who own them on the New York Stock Exchange. I think there was a genuine fear at boardroom level at Old Trafford that there could be litigation if he was effectively given the keys to the Glazers' benefits, and other shareholders were going to lose out. So this deal, it was announced at 4 p.m. and we're now sort of on the list of semi-approved people, in the sense that I got an email to say, this is the embargoed press release, stand by your beds. And I've been on standby on 3 or 4 occasions over the course of the last couple of months. You know, the TV companies would say, we think the deal is going to go through today. Can you make sure you're at home and get ready to waffle on about it? So it came through half an hour before it was formally announced. So that was 4 p.m. on Christmas Eve, which, as you rightly pointed out, did not go down particularly well at home. I'd planned a romantic meal together. I was also en route to see my grandchildren, and I play the role of Father Christmas. Yeah, clearly, simply because the real Father Christmas delegates responsibility to appropriately suitable people. There was the strange scenario of me talking to Sam Matterface on TalkSport whilst dressed as Santa Claus, followed by having to take. And I said to some of the TV companies, "Do you want me to change out of this? We'd rather you did. Yes, if you don't mind."
Well, Kieran, just imagine the memes around the world. If now we go to the North Pole for Santa's take on the Manchester United deal. Can I just point out, next year, Kieran, I'm a far more likely reliable Father Christmas than you are. Just in general, just in the fact that I love the whole Christmas thing, and I can do the white beard if I just don't shave for a couple of days. So getting an accountant to step in as Father Christmas at short notice, seasonally adjusting the presents, so on and so forth. So, just while we're talking about that, Kieran, why Christmas Eve? Was there any significant? I mean, was this meant to be tucked away when people were not paying attention? Was that the point?
No. They had been trying to get the deal over the line for quite a long period of time, but the lawyers were wanting to dot I's and cross T's to such an extent that there would be as close to a zero chance of litigation coming from other shareholders. One of the advantages of being a company which is listed on the New York Stock Exchange is you get all of the benefits and the attention that brings. One of the downsides is that America is a very litigious country, and the Manchester United, that was the earliest, and also the deal now has to be approved by the Premier League in terms of passing the owners and directors test. As well as buying the shares, which is all the focus on. There's an agreement that Jim Ratcliffe's representatives will take over the running of the football side of the business. And if he passes the owners and directors test, he is committing to put in $300 million into the club. Now, if they manage to get that done before the end of January, that would allow Manchester United to potentially spend some more money as far as the transfer market is concerned. Because under the FFP rules, you're only allowed to lose £15 million over 3 years. We've seen Manchester United having to use the loan market in the last couple of windows, which isn't something you'd normally associate with them, simply because they're right up against it in terms of FFP. But if owners put money into the club, the first £90 million would count towards your FFP budget, and therefore your ability to be more flexible in the transfer market. The New York Stock Exchange, it's closed on Christmas Day, but it actually opened on December the 26th. They don't have the equivalent of Boxing Day or St. Stephen's Day for our Irish listeners. And therefore, I think they just took the view, let's just get this done, because it speeds up the process in terms of the ability of the club to become under part of the Ineos stroke Jim Ratcliffe regime. He's bought it via a company based in the Isle of Man, which seems a strange thing to do. A company called Trawler Limited, Isle of Man, not noted for its transparency. And it does make you feel slightly uneasy that we've now got a company based in the Isle of Man owning 25% of Manchester United. Manchester United is registered in the Cayman Islands, another part of the world where the focus is on wealth management, shall we say, rather than transparency. And then it's traded in New York, and you've got the other batch of shareholders based mainly in Florida and so on. So the reaction that I've seen from sort of what you might describe as my hardcore Reds mates is they're happier than they were, but I wouldn't describe them as being deliriously happy. The Glazers still have a majority stake. Where this is going to go going forwards, nobody knows. There are clauses in the contract, which means Jim Ratcliffe can't say anything negative about the Glazers and vice versa. If for whatever reason the deal doesn't get over the final line, either due to rejection by the Premier League or the New York authorities object, then they have to go and pay substantial compensation to each other. So simply to cover each other's legal and financial advisory fees. It's a funny one. I've never seen anything like this before, where you buy a quarter of the club and you get 100% control over what's happening on the football side of things, and what happens if there is a conflict. What happens if the Glazers say, "Well, this is the budget.
Yeah,
it's up to you to choose how to spend it."
It's never a good sign, it occurs to me, Kieran, that you have to have something in the contract that you both agree not to slag each other off. But there are three questions, Kieran. First of all, you mentioned the company in the Isle of Man, Trawler, I believe they're called.
Yeah.
So my first question to you is this a new company, a company that's been set up to buy 25% of Man United? Secondly, can you remind us what the potential litigation would be from the shareholders who may miss out, as you mentioned? And then thirdly, and you've just alluded to this, he's taking over, or he or Ineos, whoever it is, are taking over the football side of the business. But for someone like me, it's very hard to distinguish where the football side of the business and the business side of the business ends. So, for example, broadcasting deals, overseas sponsorship, their undertaken partner in Nigeria and so on. So perhaps you could run through those in order, Kieran. So Trawler, first of all, this company.
So Trawler is a bespoke company which has been set up in the Isle of Man to facilitate this deal.
Okay, right.
It looks as if it's going to be owned by Jim Ratcliffe rather than Ineos. So it's going to be his wealth rather than that of his successful company. And why that name, I don't know. It's often if it's an off-the-shelf company, it just happens to be the next one in the line, or there could be some form of in-joke that nobody's quite realised what the gag is yet. In terms of litigation, in terms of litigation, directors of companies have a responsibility to act in the best interests of shareholders. So if the Manchester United board had approved of an earlier offer from Sir Jim Ratcliffe, in which he was just buying shares from the Glazer family and he was just buying the B shares, and Manchester United's also changed its constitution, because historically, if the Glazers sold shares, they automatically became the A shares, and they stopped having 10 votes each, and they only had 1 vote each. So they changed the constitution to allow the transference of B shares and keeping those voting rights. And you could see some of the other shareholders who had bought shares in Manchester United in good faith saying, well, hold on, how come he's getting these benefits and we haven't? We don't think the Manchester United board is acting in the best interests of all of the shareholders as a result of this deal. It's only acting in the best interests of the Glazer family. And therefore, we feel that we have a legitimate complaint, and we will therefore use the form of legal redress via silver-tongued friends, which that's business. And if you take a look at who owns the shares of Manchester United that are traded on the New York Stock Exchange, there are some big hitters there. There are some big investment funds who will have big legal departments, and they're saying we're getting a raw deal here. So as part of the deal, they will be able to sell their shares, up to a quarter of their shares, to Sir Jim Ratcliffe for $33 each. So they'll be making a decent profit on these. So if you own 4 shares in Manchester United, you'll be able to sell 1 to Sir Jim, and whatever price you paid for it, the highest price we've seen Manchester United shares is $27 in the last 18 months. The lowest price is just over 10.5. So you could be making a wee bit of a return there. In terms of this strange relationship, I was talking to somebody senior in football earlier today, who quite rightly brought up the point which you made. There are going to be conflicts. What happens if the commercial department say we've just signed a new deal with a telephone company in Nigeria or a snack company in South Korea? They're going to be our official partners, and they want 3 players to go across and do an advert for it. And the coach says, "Well, we've got a game in 4 days. This is ludicrous." And Sir Jim's guys say, "Well, this is crazy, because you're committing people to 16, 17 hours of travelling by plane. They need to be focusing on the next match and so on. And commercial is controlled by the Glazers. Football is controlled by Sir Jim. So it could be a non-harmonious relationship between 2 sets of people who are used to getting their own way. So we'll have to see. Sometimes you have to make compromises, but these people are not used to making compromises.
Well, yeah, a final distinction on that last question, as there's a couple of people have asked this. In terms of, Ratcliffe is now taking over the football side of the business, is what we're told. Does that mean that he becomes the transfer fund, essentially, that it's going to be his money that's buying players, or will the Glazers still be investing in players? Because again, if that is the case, that's going to be, if the Glazers now suddenly have no say whatsoever on players coming in, I shouldn't think they'd be too happy, unless, of course, they've had no interest in that in the last 10 seasons anyway. I don't really know how it works, but it seems to me that there is a huge potential there. If you've got somebody running one half of the business and somebody, and again, I keep mentioning this, that John Textor at Palace keeps saying it's the worst thing he ever did, not buying the whole club, and this is on a much, much, much larger scale, with much heavier hitters and much bigger lawyers, I imagine. So you feel that the potential for future problems there is enormous.
Yes, I think you're absolutely right. Who is going to set the football budget? Now, if we take a look at Manchester United historically, and I'm not a fan of the Glazers, I think I've always made that fairly clear. But at the same time, what they have done is they said, this is the amount of money you've got to spend. And Manchester United have spent, since Sir Alex Ferguson retired, they've spent just under £1.9 billion gross.
Wow.
So they have set competitive budgets. And then the Glazers say, director of football, the coach, the recruitment side of things, look, we don't understand soccer. We don't really get involved in that type of thing. You choose who's going to be the coach, who's going to be the player side. Yes, we have a power of ultimate veto, but on a day-to-day basis, we're going to delegate that to you. So one would assume that budget, there must be some form of contract between Sir Jim and the Glazers that says, over the course of the next 3 years, 5 years, this is the agreed budget, which will be based on a percentage of total revenues, player sales, and so on. So there must be something which is trying to minimise that potential creation of conflict. Could Sir Jim put more money in to top that up? Yes. Could the Glazers? Well, they could, but they won't, because they never have done historically. And then it's up to Sir Jim's team. We've seen Dave Brailsford there at the club already. There are rumours doing the rounds that Manchester United are going to try to headhunt Dan Ashworth, who's Newcastle United's director of football, previously at Brighton, previously with England, previously with West Brom, somebody who's thought of extremely highly within the industry, to sort of take over that person who is identifying and recruiting talent. So there must be some form of mechanism which says that you've got £200 million a year to spend. Anything more than that, Jim, that comes out of your pocket.
Right.
And that's to prevent the Glazers saying, well, we don't want him. Or you're spending too much on players.
Right. Not a good Christmas for Wayne Rooney. Kieran, sacked by Birmingham City just short of 3 months into a 3.5-year contract. So presumably that's going to cost Birmingham's American owners a fair few quid.
Well, I spoke to a sports employment lawyer this morning, and it'll come as no surprise, Kevin, to find out the answer was, well, Kieran, it depends. There will be caveats. There has indeed been talk that Wayne Rooney says, look, it's not worked out. I don't want any money anyway. Or it could be that he's so hacked off with the way that he has been treated. And there's a case for understanding that as well, that his representatives might say, well, hold on, Wayne, you signed this contract with good faith. Gary Cook has been saying one thing and then doing another. Don't be Mr. Nice Guy in respect of this. Could he potentially have some form of financial settlement on the back of this? Yes, certainly. And that will be embedded into the contract terms. Is he likely to get all 3.5 years or 3.25 years remaining? I think the answer to that is no. He does have an obligation to try to find alternative employment, or to say, actually, I've decided that management's not for me going forwards, and that there'll be an automatic limit on as to what Birmingham City are paying him. He was, according to some reports, he was on £1.5 million a year. He's denied that, but that could mean he's on £1.4 million a year for all we know, or it could be £1 million a year plus substantial bonuses. So you always have to take these things with a degree of caution. The average length of tenure for a manager in the Championship is only 10 months. And if it was any other club that had sat their manager, we probably wouldn't be having this discussion, because there have been substantial dismissals in the EFL. Clearly, he was a very high profile acquisition in the first place, when there was a lot of noise in relation to the new owners of Birmingham City and the Tom Brady links and so on. Birmingham City fans were very happy with John Eustace. So Wayne Rooney was greeted with guarded optimism, and that's not come to fruition. And we've seen this at Birmingham before. Remember Gianfranco Zola came in and replaced somebody, and that relationship didn't work out either.
I think Gianfranco Zola is one of the few Birmingham managers with a lower win percentage than Wayne Rooney. I think the interesting one, though, is that people, it's never the person themselves, it's always people around them who say, well, he was told that this was a long-term project. He certainly wasn't expecting to only been given 13 or 14 games, which is why I imagine I don't have spidey senses the way you do, Kieran. I do if there's cheese around, not when it comes to football finances. It's why I imagine he probably will be looking at some sort of compensation if he was told that this is a long-term project. And also the circumstance, as you said, they were sixth in the table. I mean, they'd just beaten West Brom when they brought a new manager, and it seemed very strange.
Travel to Japan with Trafalgar with everything taken care of. From the must-see icons to exclusive one-of-a-kind experiences. Learn local secrets and make deep connections that will bring the best of the land of the rising sun to life. All with the expert guidance of a travel director. Contact your travel advisor or call Trafalgar at 866-513-1995 or visit trafalgar.com/tour Japan. That's TRAFALGAR.com/tour Japan.
The Ratcliffe story, Kieran, and the opening of the transfer window and a never-ending succession of Premier League games meant that quite a few big stories went under the radar a little bit. And this FIFA football agent story is one of them, Kieran, considering how much effort it took FIFA to go to war with football agents, and considering what's happened now, it all seems rather bizarre.
Yes, I think it's fair to say that FIFA has had a number of slaps in the face.
Yeah.
It tried to force through these rules. It tried to make football agents the pantomime villains of the industry. And my argument has always been, if we take a look at the the revenues that football is generating. They are heading in an upward direction. Agents have a proportion of that, and you don't have issues in terms of you've worked in various elements of the media in terms of 5 Live and Channel 4. So you know horse racing and people in other sports. You don't see golf players or jockeys or cricket players complaining about their agents. You don't even see footballers complaining about their agents. And I teach footballers and I teach football managers, and they've all got agents, and they don't actually have a grumble. It seems to be it's the media has an issue with it, and Gianni Infantino is a character. It's fair to say. And he is of the populist camp when it comes to public pronouncements. So they decided to go after agents. Now, are there bad agents out there? Yes, there are. There are bad comedians. There are bad accountants. There are bad lecturers. There are bad people in all professions. I think agents have broadly welcomed the fact that there are now going to be exams to introduce a degree of professionalism into the industry, although that's not necessarily good news for those players who want to use a relative as their representative. Keep it in the family. So the money's not being lost to the family to a certain extent, although it could be argued that those agents don't necessarily maximise the earnings potential of the player. But that's a separate issue. There have been a series of lawsuits, both here in the UK, Germany, France. I think it went to France, but there were rules in France that made it very difficult. That FIFA's attempt to put a cap on agents' fees, effectively of 3%, were nullified, and it was defeat after defeat after defeat for FIFA. And then this announcement came through that they were suspending the introduction of the rules. And again, for the sake of transparency, there was a lawsuit in Lausanne, in Switzerland last year. I was asked to be an expert witness to look at the finances of. So I had to go to Companies House and download the accounts for agents, and going, well, actually, an awful lot of agents don't making diddly squat. There's some very high profile ones which have made huge sums of money, and the Raiola deal in relation to Paul Pogba is one which has been discussed at length and so on.
That's a sitcom comedy door.
Oh, welcome to my.
Is the vicar? Is the vicar at the door? Darling, it's the vicar. Oh my God, we ain't got nothing in. Pull your trousers on, Kieran. God, it's the vicar and his wife. Finley's obviously not in then.
No, Finley has been taken out for a walk by Emma. Emma is our bonus dog walker. She gives him an additional stretch of the legs. Uh-huh. I take him for his early morning and his late evening walks. Okay. She's absolutely brilliant. So she takes him across field and down dale, where the places we live and so on. They've got a bloodied nose. They're saying we're not getting rid of these rules. We're just going back to lick our wounds and perhaps come back. But why didn't they negotiate? Why didn't they collaborate with the agents to find out what the agents' concerns were? It was a very arrogant approach taken by FIFA. And arrogance and Gianni Infantino, they're not words you'd normally use in the same sentence, of course, but on this occasion, I think I'm in camp agent.
It will come as no surprise, Kieran, to you or our listeners, that I love a Christmas manger scene. It's always one of my favourite days of the year when you put the tree up and the decorations and you put a couple of little Christmas manger. I can't help feeling when Gianni Infantino does it, that when he puts the little baby Jesus in the manger, it's got his face. I somehow feel that's how. Also occurs to me, Kieran, that if people listening to this for the first time will think, these two have not done a pod before, have they? because we seem to have forgotten how to do it in the 2 weeks that we've had off. Just very easily distracted. We don't normally deal in rumours on this pod, Kieran, but a couple of newspapers this morning have picked up on this rumour and substantiated it. But it seems that there's another club in the Premier League who could be going down the Everton route, certainly on the Premier League naughty stare financially.
Yes. Let me just give you a little sort of a little bit of backstory on it. A story has been circulating on certain WhatsApp groups. As you know, I've got good relationships with quite a few people in the media these days. That a club was going to be charged by the Premier League in respect of breach of financial fair play rules. And the speculation was that that club was going to be one of either A, Everton, who were going to be charged for last season's accounts, B, Chelsea, because the Todd Bowley spendathon, or C, Nottingham Forest. And I got the spreadsheet out. Everton, I think, will be just about okay because they sold Anthony Gordon. And we've always said if you sell one of your academy players. Chelsea is an intriguing one, but they've got the benefit of the 8 and 9 year amortization policies in their 22-23 accounts. They'd sold, again, a couple of their homegrown players, their academy players. And then when it comes to Forest, when Forest were promoted from the Championship, based on my calculations, they were in a gnat's tooth of breaching the rules, but they were just on the right side, which meant that they had a limited amount of wiggle room in terms of how much they could afford to spend in the Premier League in their first season, which was, of course, season 22-23. It's been well documented that Nottingham Forest bought an awful lot of players. Now, that was partly due to the fact that when they were promoted, they'd actually had players who were out of contract at the end of June, and they had a few loan players as well, so they actually needed to boost their squad. So have they spent a lot of money? Yes, they have. What are the wages of those players? This is where speculation takes over. All types of figures are being bandied around as far as the media are concerned. But they were certainly having to be quite cautious. And we said in respect of the figures earlier, in respect of this £105 million in the Premier League you're allowed to lose over 3 years. If you've been promoted from the Championship, for every year you've been in the EFL, you're allowed £13 million maximum loss. And every year in the Premier League, it's 35. So this would have been Nottingham Forest's first season in the Premier League. So it would have been 135 and 2 13s. So their maximum financial fair play loss is £61 million. Have they exceeded it? I've got absolutely no idea. But they were certainly up against it. So they are rumoured to have asked our very good friend, Nick DeMarco, to act on their behalf. But I'm not sure. Given that they've not been charged, then how can that be the case? So it's a fascinating story in terms of gossip and rumour and intrigue. We've had plenty of football to watch as well as the darts over the course of the last week. But this is the nature of the beast that we're in. Could it be another club? Could it be? The Premier League did change its constitution that all clubs now have to submit their accounts by the 31st of December, and the Premier League, in theory, can then start to look at them straight away with a view to potentially charging them by mid-January and having a ruling before the end of the season. Because one of the issues that caused a lot of grief in respect of Everton was that Everton didn't submit their accounts until March 2023, which didn't give the Premier League enough time to A, look at them in enough detail, B, put together a commission. And that's why we've seen things drag on. So the Premier League wants to fast track. I think that's to be applauded. We want certainty and clarity and transparency from all. I've looked at the Forest accounts in detail, and there's a couple of bits there which I think are missing, which are no more than irritants for me because of the nature of the work that I do. I'm not saying that there's nothing inherently incorrect with them.
He doesn't look 16, does he, that darts kid?
He doesn't, does he?
God knows what he's going to look like when he's 26. He's going to... God, I mean, it's a fantastic story, but you look at him and you think, somebody check his birth certificate. He's 38. This is somebody as an agent here, there's a PR company making a big story out of this. The Everton thing now means that there's a precedent. So Forest fans will be worried now because, you know, the only outcome of, if it is Forest and there is a commission and they are found guilty, the only outcome is a points deduction. There's the Premier League have left no other wiggle room for themselves, have they? Because if they don't, Everton will be straight on the phone to Nick DeMarco themselves, I imagine.
Yes, so you're absolutely right. A precedent has been set. I think that precedent is a logical one because, as we've discussed before, if you fine a billionaire £1 million, they don't notice it in exactly the same way as if I get a parking fine and it costs me £1, I go, okay, I'll do it again. It's only when you have a genuine sufferance by the recipient that it acts as prevent yourself from doing it again, and B, acts as a deterrent in respect of other parties. So I think we do now have a rough idea of the process and the likely outcome should there be charges which are upheld, should there be a breach and they've exceeded the limit. And I absolutely understand the argument. Fans say, well, hold on, we've suffered as a result of this and we've done nothing wrong. And indeed, the fans have done nothing wrong. The counter argument is that you have benefited from having players on the pitch which other clubs who have complied with the rules would not have been able to afford to play, and therefore that's given you a competitive advantage on the pitch. So that's sort of the to and the fro. And yeah, I'm just fed up to the back teeth of it because it's...
You're fed up. Imagine how the Baroness feels, never mind you.
Yes.
Of all the stories, Kieran, that went under the radar in the last couple of weeks, there's a domestic story that I think is one of the biggest that no one's really talked about. It involves the Premier League and their discussions with the rest of football about money.
Yes. The Premier League has this thing called the New Deal, which I personally think is very pretentious. As somebody who admired what Franklin D. Roosevelt did nearly 100 years ago to change the US economy. And as part of the New Deal, the Premier League was going to substantially increase the money that it gives to clubs in the EFL. And it also committed at the start of this season, or it didn't commit, it suggested that it was going to give EFL clubs £88 million to divide between those clubs as sort of as an element of good faith. And the clubs in the Premier League then started squabbling. And they said, okay, well, we've not got more money coming in because as we saw the announcement of the new domestic TV deal. So we've not got more money coming in. So that's £88 million coming out of our pockets. And they then started arguing. And then we got to December. And by all accounts, at the start of December, the Premier League said to the EFL, look, none of your clubs have gone bust yet in the first few months of the season. So therefore, we're going to halve that money to £44 million. And the EFL clubs are going, well, hold on, we've not gone bust, but we have borrowed money ourselves because we thought that we were getting this 88 million quid. And now there's been more arguments at Premier League HQ in terms of the Premier League, which used to be a united front, has now very much turned into factions. I had a discussion with a chief executive of an EFL club. And he said, and I won't mention the name of the club he was referring to, he says, these clubs, and I directly quote, self-centred scummy twats. In terms of, you used to be an EFL club, you're now in the Premier League, you could be back in the Premier League in a season or two, and you are just acting purely out of self-interest. You're not seeing the bigger picture. You were one of the clubs that weren't happy about the gap between the Premier League and the EFL, and now you've changed. So there's an element of Animal Farm in this. Four was it 2 legs good, 4 legs better?
No, 4 legs good, 2 legs bad.
Yes, yeah. But then it changed, didn't it, as over time, and that appears to be the case with regards to this. So I've had a few calls in respect of EFL clubs who are very unhappy. The issue, as far as the Premier League is concerned, is okay. Let's just say it's £88 million. There's actually some more money on the table going forwards. How are you going to cut the cake? Now, Manchester United, Liverpool, the big six, Spurs, Arsenal, and so on, they say, well, it's simple. You cut that additional money equally in 20 ways, which means that it's 4.4 million a year. The other clubs, the other 14, are saying, well, hold on, you've already got a financial advantage over us of £300 or £400 million a year. So on a percentage basis, we, the smaller clubs, are having to give up far more than you are the bigger clubs. And then, of course, and by the way, you're the guys who were saying 18 months ago, we're going to jump ship and join the Super League and ta-ra, and so on. So there is a ringleader of the other 14. I won't name that ringleader. I'll tell you afterwards. Who is rallying the troops? He isn't the person who was called a self-centred scummy something or other by the EFL chief executive, but there's warfare both within the Premier League and between the Premier League and the EFL, and certainly the EFL clubs and the EFL hierarchy are completely hacked off with this. And it's not good for football. The gaps are just too big. It encourages gambling. It encourages overspending. It's ignoring one of the things which is wonderful about this country, in the sense that we've got this 92, which is a wonderful creation, and you should look after. If I win the lottery, I should still care about people
of course,
that used to be my friends.
Yeah. Well, it's not even the 92 anymore. It's 112, isn't it? Or however many teams are in the National League.
Yeah.
I'm trying to use my skill and judgment and experience of 4 years on this pod to work out which championship CEO it would who would use the expression self-centred scummy twats. Accrington aren't in the championship, so that knocks out one potential person. I've got a feeling it may be the CEO of a club that I possibly pass on the train on the way from Norbury to London Bridge, but I'm probably gonna leave it there. You say, Kieran, that the Premier League, there's no united front in the Premier League on this issue. So we know that decisions in the Premier League have to be carried by at least 14 clubs have to vote. Does this mean then that 14 clubs in the Premier League put their hands up and said, we need to cut this offer of £88 million to £44 million? Because if so, that's incredibly disappointing, and it's incredibly disingenuous to say you don't need that money because you're not going bust, when, as you say, they're not going bust because they've borrowed money off the back of the fact that they're going to get this £88 million.
Yeah, I suspect there could have been 20 clubs who said, actually, we'll reduce it from 88 to 44. 44 to 0.
Really?
So, it's... And then there's another elephant in the room with regards to this, is there's going to be an election this year. There's potentially going to be, as part of the manifesto, if the legislation for the new football regulator is not passed by the time of the election, I would imagine it would form part of the manifesto of both the major parties and some of the other parties as well. If I was the Premier League, be careful what you wish for, because you could have a government who takes a more aggressive approach to the regulator. And what we have at present, and this is horrible, because it's not just politics, it's very political, that the Premier League are lobbying against the regulator. They're trying to reduce the powers. They're trying to find think tanks stroke shadily funded organisations to act on their behalf, to try to make out that it's going to be a government-controlled game. And that's not going to be the case. Yet, to be honest, the regulator wants to be as light touch as possible, doesn't really want to get involved. But the main issue that the Premier League has is that the division, the distribution of TV monies could be allocated to the regulator's decision. And I think what they've tried to do with the New Deal is they're saying, here's some money. Would you mind dropping your enthusiasm for the regulator as part of this deal? And then we'll be able to say, well, look, we in the Premier League, we're opposed to the regulator. The EFL, we've given them a few crumbs, which no doubt could be reversed in due course, of course. And then you've got the FA, and it's a glib thing to say. The FA has done FA. The FA has not got involved. It's supposed to be for all. It's supposed to be the governing body, which is the benign dictator and in respect of football. And it just has washed its hands of what's happening as far as the professional game is concerned. I don't think it reflects particularly well on them either. But the regulator could come in and say, look, you've not managed to get an agreement. Right, this is what we're going to do. And if it does, the Premier League ain't gonna like what it hears.
Yeah, Prince William.
So it's playing a gap. We're playing liar's poker here.
Prince William, or as we would call it, poker, Kieran, basically. Yeah. Prince William needs to sort his act out, doesn't he? It's all very well getting to see the FA Cup final for nothing every year, but he needs to pull his finger out and head the FA up in a more effective fashion. We interviewed Pat Nevin recently, Kieran. God knows when, because it was in the middle of Panto, Christmas party, Palace Brighton, so there's a lot of alcohol going. Palace Brighton wasn't the best game in the world either, was it? But
no, it's good. The time in the Parsons before the match was more enjoyable than the match.
It was indeed, yeah, and also the sound of 23,000 Palace fans at half time saying the one thing we shouldn't do in the second half is just sit back for 45 minutes and invited Brighton. Oh, okay, that's exactly what we're doing. But we interviewed Pat Nevin. As an interview that went down very well, Kieran, as an interview that was full of insight. But during that interview, we spoke about his time as chair of the PFA back in the mid-90s and how the PFA has changed now. But the PFA are, I think, quite rightly working themselves up about something, and there's a possibility of legal action that the PFA are about to take over, I think, a very obvious, serious issue.
Yes. We had the announcement of a new Super League before Christmas, and the number of group games is going to go from, if this comes to fruition, of which I still think it's a very remote chance, would go from 6 to 14. And on top of that, you've got an expanded World Cup, you've got the Nations League, you've got the expanded Club World Cup. There are extra demands being put upon footballers at the top level. And the critics will say, well, they're earning a lot of money. And the players will say, we're not denying that we're earning a lot of money, but we are elite athletes. And you and I, we both say, we play 40 or 50 games a season, 60 games a season, but we play park football, and you didn't get Usain Bolt to do 60 or 70 100-meter runs a season, because it's not in the best interest. If you take a look at racehorses, the best racehorses, they only run a few times each season because you want them to be in peak condition. I listened to a talk from Maheta, who's head of the PFA, recently, and he says, let's just go back to the Champions League final of 2023. Manchester City won it, but let's be honest, it was a crap game.
Yeah.
And, Haaland wasn't at the races. Kevin De Bruyne had to go off injured. If you want to see the best players in the world playing the best football, don't just try to use them, as pack horses and knacker them. Yes, I understand it from a financial point of view, is that more matches equals more money, but they're killing the golden goose. Who are, if the standard of football starts to drop, then the ratings will start to drop, and so on. There is too much football. And this is where the PFA is saying we've got to look after the best interests of our owners. Newcastle are struggling to put out a team. In terms, Brighton, we've had 10 injuries recently. Manchester United, lots of players injured, and you're seeing it being mentioned more and more. And nobody's saying, is there perhaps a reason for this? Because players don't set out to get injured. They're soft tissue injuries, so it's calf, it's hamstring, it's all of the things which you do when you're overworked as an athlete. So we'll see.
I don't know what level of Sunday football you played, Kieran, to be playing 60 games a year, unless your accountants league had a European Championships accountants league. 15 games a season was enough for us. If the PFA then, Kieran, if they're talking about the possibility of legal action over the increasing number of matches, but who do they take the legal action against? Is it the broadcasters? Is it FIFA for adding new tournaments? Is it the clubs themselves? I've struggled to understand a little bit what their approach would be and who they would actually sue to try and get fewer matches played. Because obviously there has to be 38 league matches. There will be as many League Cup and FA Cup matches as hopefully your club will play. Beyond that, it seems to be the extra tournaments that they're. But you want your club to be in the Champions League. You wanted Brighton to be in whatever it is. So, but that comes with extra games, doesn't it? So, then there's the whole thing. The more substitutions were brought into that. While I applaud the PFA's approach, and while I absolutely 100% agree with it, I'm just a little bit confused as to who they would be taking this action against.
Yes, I think you're absolutely right. If you've got a plaintiff, you've got to have a defendant. Could that be FIFA in terms of they are the ultimate responsibility of the game? And this isn't just coming from the Professional Footballers Association. I think if you listen to FIFPro, who are the global players representative, the global players union, they have also voiced similar concerns. So it would be against the ultimate governing bodies to say, you've approved of these competitions. We as members, we will have to take some form of sanction. So what happens if the players unions globally say, good luck with the FIFA Club World Cup. Our members have decided that we're not going to participate.
Kieran,
so I think it'll be sort of withdrawal of labour.
Yeah, we still have 4 stories left. So much for guys. We'll just ease our way back into the new year with a nice calm pod. There's sort of 2 news stories and 2 account stories, so perhaps it's already been quite a long pod, so we can maybe not spend as much time on this as... Not rattle through, Kieran, because that would be unprofessional, but, The first one looks like it might be good news for Southend.
Yes. Southend have been subject to a transfer embargo from the National League as a result of financial shenanigans and misdemeanours under the current still owner, but almost gone, Ron Martin. That has been lifted. Southend's crowds have... the level of support for the team has been magnificent, considering that they're in the 5th tier of English football. So they do now have flexibility and fair play to everybody at the club. I've had a few Zoom calls. The local journalist Chris Phillips has done a magnificent job in highlighting what's going on, and it makes their job harder because there's always the threat that you'll be denied access to this, that, and the other. But there have been some fantastic people highlighting the issue at the club. So the transfer embargo is being lifted. We're now in January. They will be looking to push on. National League's really tough this year because the National League's really tough every year these days because so many clubs are professional.
Will Ron Martin have done anything specific that's led to the lifting of the transfer embargo?
I think in terms of players being paid on time, HMRC being paid on time, because that can now be evidenced that the National League has said, well, you've shown an improvement in terms of your operational behaviour. We're fully aware of the new owners putting in financial commitments as well, so we're prepared to lift the embargo.
So basically all the stuff that Ron Martin should have been doing from the start, none of this would have happened if he'd done that then. Okay. You'd have thought, Kieran, MPs would be... you'd have thought MPs would have enough on their plate at the moment, what with another 4 weeks before they go back to work after their well-earned Christmas break. But it's a rather specific football-related law that they are debating or calling for.
Yes. Now, again, I take this story with a pinch of salt, given where it was read.
The Daily Mail?
It could be. It says MPs are calling for a specific law to punish people who enter football stadiums without tickets. So Prince William, for one, he just, which I don't think that's what they had in mind.
No.
So this is sort of on the back of what we saw at the European Championships, where a number of people acted like idiots. There's not many people that get into grounds without tickets these days, and there are specific laws which address this. So yeah, I put my reservations up on social media with regards to this. If you've got existing legislation, why are you creating new legislation? It's because it's an easy win. You'll get the plaudits from some of the newspapers and from those people. And there are a lot of people in society today who are genuinely scared of all of the boogeymen that the media portray, whether that's on their basis of their race, of their religion, of their sexuality, or the fact that they are football fans. For football fans, read football hooligans. There is misbehaviour at the races because I've been to Chester races on a Saturday because the Baroness's brother owns a few horses. It gets lively. We've seen evidence at Goodwood and Aintree and other racehorses, but there's no suggestion of that. Rugby fans, both Union and League, they enjoy the occasional drink at a match, and that can result in misbehaviour and so on. And yet, it is the football fans who are targeted. Any football fan who misbehaves, throw the book at them. Banning orders are available. Take away their season tickets. If they've broken the rules, then punish them accordingly. So why is this being done? If everything was rosy in the garden in relation to the broader structural issues of this country, I'd say go ahead, because you've solved education, you've dealt with the issues of the health service, you've dealt with problems in respect of in transport, defence, policing, social care. Fantastic job, well done. Now go and have a go at some goons who are turning up to football matches with no tickets. Why are you prioritising this above these issues? I don't know.
Yeah, and the racecourse where I've seen the worst trouble, Kieran? Ascot. At the end of
Royal Ascot.
Royal Ascot. I covered it for 5 Live 4 years running, and the second 2 years, both times coming out. And I know I had the top hat and tails on, where I had occasion to say to a policeman, "Are you happy with that behaviour? The way those people are behaving there?" the public urination and the fighting. The police went, no one's complained. I said, I'm complaining. And it gave me the severe impression that if I carried on complaining, I'd be the one that got arrested. It's carnage at the end of Royal Ascot. But apparently that's just high spirits. Yep. That's just high spirits. So,
letting off steam.
Letting off steam, exactly. It's hard work in that bank, 2 days a week, earning those enormous bonuses. So they're entitled to let off steam. West Ham's latest accounts are out, Kieran, and there's an unusual, and I don't know if it's worrying, but it's a fairly big anomaly in there.
Yeah, I mean, West Ham, fantastic season last year. They won the Europa Conference, memorable campaign. Not such a good season in the Premier League, but it wasn't a disaster. You would have thought, well, if they won a cup, they must have made some money. They actually lost money. They lost £18 million, despite having the benefit of only paying £3.5 million a year in rent for the stadium, which holds 60,000. It's going up to 68,000. And I was on a West Ham podcast, and they're saying, have they invested in players? Well, yeah, West Ham bought players for around about 180 million quid in 22-23, which is a significant investment. And I'm going, well, blimey, that's not like David Sullivan to open the wallet widely, and mainly because he's not, because they've used the club credit card, and as a result of that, they owe £171 million in outstanding transfer fees to other clubs, which is fine. That's the way that football operates these days. But I'm genuinely concerned that we're going to have, and we use this as an analogy, we're going to have a position similar to we had in the world of traditional finance in 2007, 2008, where there was an awful lot of debt being transferred from bank to bank to bank to bank in a glorified game of Ring of Roses. And it only takes one person to fall down when you've then got a domino effect. West Ham generate money. They've repaid. They've sold Declan Rice. So it's not, West Ham are not going to be the problem. But I think this is indicative of a much broader issue as far as football is concerned, in relation to clubs are using credit as a means of funding their transfer activity. And credit's not the best way of doing things if things start to turn tough. There's no indication that will be the case in the Premier League because it's still ridiculously popular. But international markets, a bit more of a concern.
And Bristol City, finally, Kieran, have published their latest figures. I presume there's something of significance in there, otherwise we wouldn't mention it.
Bristol City. Yeah, Bristol as a city, fantastic.
Brilliant place.
History, heritage. It's a glorious place. They've not been mentioned as sort of promotion favourites, or they've not troubled the scorers in terms of getting into the playoffs recently. Their owner has been sticking in 400 grand a week to cover the losses over the course of sort of the last 6 or 7 years. And this goes back to what we were saying earlier in relation to the Premier League and the EFL. Clubs are either having to borrow money or they're reliant on the benevolence of owners. And I think Steve Lansdowne is the guy in charge. He's been a huge benefactor to both Bristol City as a football club and Bristol Rugby. But how long can this continue before these people eventually say, why am I doing this? The average losses in the Championship are 470 grand a week. And it's only sustainable if you've got people willing to cover those losses, if their personal circumstances change, or if they go, I don't need this anymore. I think we could have a huge challenge in the game.
Thank you to everyone who's donated to the pod via our Patreon page. If you'd like to make a small monthly contribution as well, that'd be very kind of you, and it gets you access to our chat community and our regular quizzes, and you can do that by going to patreon.com/priceoffootball. If you have a question you'd like answered on the show, email us at questions@priceoffootball.com. And if you'd like to buy our book or one of our other books, get us. Or you get yourself a Price of Football t-shirt. You can find details on our website, which is priceoffootball.com. We'll be back on Monday with our regular questions pod. In the meantime, I shall hand you over to Mr. Kieran Maguire for the first time in 2024 for his customary farewell.
Thank you, everybody that's been in contact via social media and email and WhatsApp over the past few days. We're genuinely touched by your degree of enthusiasm that we put on shows over Christmas when we quite blatantly were not here. But you know, we appreciate that. If it helped you doing the Sprouts, then grand. And also to everybody that turned up at the Christmas quiz.
Yep,
Richard,
lovely.
your book is en route. I'm taking it to the post office this afternoon. There's various ways you can support the show, one of which is to give the show a review or the book a review. Doesn't matter what you say. You could even say you would rather have the show presented by the boy wonder, Wayne Rooney, and the boy wonder, Luke Littler, the darts player, and it wouldn't make a blind bit of difference to us. Good luck to all, wherever you are, and Happy New Year.
Yeah, one of those people is going to be in a better mood than the other, just at the moment, aren't they, to be honest?
Yes, they are.
Bye, everybody.
Yes.
Happy New Year.
Bye-bye.
The Price of Football. The Price of Football.